Hello everybody, my name is Craig Bennett, and today I'm going to get into a video on how to turn a image like this into something that is laser engraved like this. So as far as things goes, one big thing I want to point out is note that there is obviously detail loss and things like that, but it is possible, as you see, to actually laser engrave, burn an image in using laser into most materials, as long as you know how to properly do it. So one big thing I want to mention with this is, because I know that a lot of people come across this not knowing that you actually can do this at all. Towards the end of this, I'm going to explain a little bit more about lasers itself, specifically little mini buyer's guide, so that way you can pick the right one for you, and that way you know what you're getting yourself into. But as far as that goes, also I'm going to get into woods and some other things that you need to watch out for. As far as that goes, I want to mention something that's very, very important when it comes to this, is you are never going to have like a full detailed image unless if the workspace is huge. And the fact of the matter is I can't say if your workspace is equals this, then you just basically transfer all the detail into it. Because the fact of the matter is I haven't seen that yet. I haven't seen a large enough workspace to do that. But smaller workspace, the more editing you're going to do to make things work. One big area I want to point out is if you take a look at, if we take a look at the beads around his arm right here, notice that you can actually see individual beads even when zooming in. Whereas if I take a look at the proper image, this one, the actual laser engrave, notice that the beads, you honestly can't see much of a distinguishing feature between them. It just kind of looks like one solid thing. And if you don't know what you're really looking at, it kind of would be, all right, is that part of the shirt or what it may be? So just note that you're going to have a loss of information. Now, why is that? If we go ahead and take a look at the some software that will actually show you what it thinks it will look like whenever you laser engrave. So one big thing to note is how this works is every single little dot here is basically a spot where the laser will burn. The more dots in the area, the darker the space is. And if we take a look at the area, if I could zoom in, where the beads are, you notice that there's very little to no dots. So think about this, like every dot here is more or less like a pixel, whether it's a dot or not, that's a pixel. And every single dot is, and it doesn't matter if you're using a diode laser or CO2. I'm not going to say all lasers are like this, but basically you're looking at 0.01 millimeters per every dot, whereas a pixel is much, much, much smaller. So just note that you're going to just lose a lot of information to the point. And even this, it looks a lot better than it obviously really is in real life. Because the fact of the matter is even this, it shows more information than what actually shows up. Now you can trick certain surfaces to show pretty much all of this, and what I mean by information, every little detail, every little thing, that's what I mean by information. So just note that, for example, the kid's nose right there, if we zoom in, we can see that there's a loss of information right there. And there's a way to trick things to do exactly that, but it's a little bit dangerous health-wise. And I'll get a little bit more into this towards the end, but you can paint surfaces and laser engrave on that. I don't recommend it. And I'll explain a little bit more when I get into the buyer's guide of the laser section. So how did I go about this at all? How did I turn this into that, into the actual laser engraved image? Well, to simply put it, I used a free program. And keep in mind, if you got Photoshop, use that. But I used a free program called GIMP. This is like Photoshop, except for it's free and it has a lot less features, and it's free. And again, it's free. So with that one in mind, just download that. I'll leave a link down below so you can just go directly to it. And you can use certain other programs if you want to, spoof it a little bit more. Escape, I think, is what a lot of people use on top of this, but I don't really, because the certain projects I'm using and also software I use, it kind of takes place of that anyway, so it's whatever. But basically throw your image in there, and what you want to use is the free select tool right here and draw an image around. So you want to know at this point, one big thing before I forget is you need to know that not all images are equal. So what I mean by this is another laser engrave I've tried. It kind of looks like crap, and the fact of the matter is it looks like crap because, in fact, this is the original. It looks like crap because there's just too much. It's too busy. For the most part, obviously you can see the boats. Obviously that's kind of point blank obvious. And now that you see this to your left, you can probably tell, okay, that's trees, that's water and whatnot. But before then, you probably had no idea what you were looking at. And that's a big thing to note, is not all images will work out. Even if you zoom in onto something, it just is not going to work out in any way at all. So that's something to note, is you can do all of these things, and as seen here, you can get something, but can you understand what it looks like? Because again, you're losing a lot of detail, and plus on top of that, you're dealing with something like a black and white type of situation. Again, if your workspace is large enough, even with black and white, you can kind of figure out what you're looking at. But the fact of the matter is since you're making the best way to explain it is if you take the image and resize it to something much smaller. So it's about 1,000 something. So let's go shrink it down to that. Just take a look, and there you go. I mean, it's all pixelated out, but the fact of the matter is take away the pixel, makes it a little bit more smooth. And that's the type of information you're looking at. It's very difficult even for yourself. And the only reason why you can kind of tell what it is because it's in color. I bet if you switch that black and white, it'll be that much harder, and just like the thing I just showed you. So as far as that goes, just note that. Figure out the images is worthwhile. And the reason why this one is worthwhile, it's not like the others where it kind of went all over the place. This is a very exact, it has very straight lines, very unique features, and it's not little tiny things all over the place. It's very exact. So with that one in mind, once you've got your image selected and uploaded in here, figure out what you want to be as the foreground versus the background. You can have a midground, which is fine, but I suggest just having a foreground versus background. And the reason why is it just makes things a lot easier to keep track of things. But with that one in mind, once you figure out which one you want to be, use the free select tool, draw around. Note that you can actually draw all the way out to wherever. So as you see here, I can draw, do all of that. So if you have to, you don't have to worry about the edges, just draw out there and go with it. Now, on the top right, you can see what's selected. What's in the white is selected. What's in the black is not. You can invert by going select, invert. And then from there, I highly suggest that you desaturate, which is right there. And what that is just makes it quick black and white. Then you can adjust the levels. So by going to color, go to levels. And you can adjust the actual how much white you want, how much gray or black you want, and you can mess around with that. From there, go to color to gray, and you don't necessarily have to do this next step, but this gives a hue around things to make things pop out more. So note that if you take it like right here, there's too much the same, and this is the real reason why I did the color to gray, is if you take a look over its head, it's just too much of the same. So there's no real detail, but once you add that, you can have a little bit of detail, a little bit of differences from one place to another. That's a big reason why I did that. But another thing that adds is, note that it adds a aura around the subject, so it makes it pop out a little bit more. So just note that you also get that ability into itself. How do you do this? Basically, go to color gray, go to desaturate color to gray, and one big thing you might want to do is go to enhance shadows, and this makes things pop out a little bit more. You don't have to. Now, the radius, the smaller it is, the less of an aura you got around things. And you can actually get a reverse on that, so you can actually cause a black aura around certain objects, depending on the picture. So just note that you can actually cause things pop out that way, whereas this one, it just pops out where, you know, it has that aura around it, and it makes it stand out a little bit. So with that, note that. Also sample what it does. So radius helps you with that. Sample basically makes it more clear. So go down to an invert thing, and at this point you can mess with the levels as shown before. You can equalize the colors and just go there, auto equalize. And the reason for that is that for me it makes it easier sometimes, some images. And then you can do color grade. This is very important where you start doing the enhance shadows, mess with the levels, and then you can go back and do it color gray and go back and forth multiple times to get whatever effect you want. See, the problem that I was having when I was just doing straight color gray, this is way too freaking dark. It will char the thing. It's just no way around it. So I had to use levels, and that whited it out way too much. But I didn't really have much of a choice, so I want to enhance it a little bit more while making it a little bit more subtle. Just note the seat. But the problem is I can go back and forth. But just note certain areas may have a desired effect versus others. Now at this point, once you're kind of done with foreground, I would highly suggest go ahead and delete the foreground, just pressing the delete button, and save the background as its own image by going to File and Export. And then go back. This is like a history timeline. And by the way, if you say go back here and start editing, all of this gets lost. So yeah, just note that. But anyways, go back to before where you delete it, and then you can save that as the other image. Now, if you made a mistake, so say for example right there, I left that tag there, and it kind of looks stupid every time I try to throw it in software. So just like that, and fade it out as if it was the background. And that doesn't show at all. It's not really much of a big difference or deal. So I didn't bother to include that into the foreground stuff. But note how much that pops out from the background. So that's the image that you will end up with. Now from here on out, you're going to either have to use software that your machine has gave you, or you're going to have to find one. You could use SnapMaker software. I'm not going to guarantee you it's not going to mess up your machine. And keep in mind that SnapMaker uses diode lasers. I'll explain a little bit more in that in a second. Whereas if you're using CO2, you might not want to do this. I don't know if it's going to really do anything nasty with CO2 laser. And keep in mind, again, this is meant more for SnapMaker stuff. But in my experience dealing with slicers like this, making G-code for one machine to another, it tends to be, whatever. So just keep that in mind, that you may run into problems, but you also may not. So this might be a good choice. So with that one in mind, going into your program, whatever you pick, you need to make sure it has what's called grayscaling. And that basically gives this effect. So from here, basically size it to whatever you want, and make sure your algorithm is set correctly. Just go through the algorithms, preview it in whatever program, and see what's best. But there's two types of movements. There is line or dot. So line is basically, it just makes a bunch of little lines. In certain images, it actually makes it a lot worse. So, and lines are considered to be a lower quality, whereas dots, it's a higher quality. It just makes a bunch of little dots. So just note that. Now, as far as the rest of it, figure out your work speeds and your other stuff, your dwell times and whatnot. And this just takes experience of figuring out per machine, per wood type or material type, and so on. And that way you're not charring things. And also the power level and stuff like that. And just figure that one out on your own. That's just going to take a little bit of experience, back trial and error type of situation. One thing I would advise you if you are starting out and like, oh, you just found out about this ability, so you just want to try it out. What I'll advise you is on your picture, portion of it, it really doesn't matter like what portion, just make sure there's like enough detail from one thing to another. It's not just, one solid thing. So say for example, with this, I don't want to do this in because there's just not enough detail compared to if I did like right in the middle where I got a dark area, some light areas and whatnot. So what I would do is pick a small space and then on the picture itself, and then throw it in there like 5 or 6 times with different power levels and speeds and whatnot. And that would tell me what settings I probably should be using if I don't have an idea of what I should be using. Now, as far as that goes, that's pretty much about it when it comes to that part. However, what about woods and stuff? Because most people, they're doing this, they're probably going to be doing it on wood. So I can't really say much about concrete, but I imagine it's about the same because I hadn't, dealt with concrete yet. But as far as woods goes, these are all bad pieces. Why is it bad? Well, the fact of the matter is, I ignore that. That was a test. But as far as the piece, it's bad because what happens is at least with dyes, I'm not sure about CO2 lasers if this still applies there. But basically, you got darker spaces, lighter spaces. You got different densities in grain right there. Plus, on top of that, the actual difference in color can massively change how much it burns one way or another, how much heat is stored up. So basically, you want to have an equalize as much as possible. And that way you can get a consistent burn out through, and you don't have to worry about power levels on this half versus that half type of situation. Now let's say that you can't get away with that because there's certain, I say for example this on the top right, I can still use that, and even on top left I can kind of use that. It's going to be a little bit more difficult on top and the bottom left, but top right I can definitely use that. Now what I would want to do is, instead of doing like side 2 like this top one up here, I will want to have it up and down. The reason why I want to have it up and down is if you have side 2, you can actually the blemish can show even more going sideways, whereas going up and down it shines through less. And then on top of that, if it's up and down, it looks more artistic. But basically, in short, the blemish shows less. The picture looks a lot more crisp than having like some type of hatchet type of situation. So note that you want things to look as even as possible when it comes to color and whatnot. Now, as far as the laser, this is a big one. So I mentioned something about painting. You can paint to give you a same color across the board. And you want to avoid this in certain type of lasers. Diode lasers and stuff like that, that's fine, but the problem is the enclosure. When you burn the paint, you're burning plastic and you're breathing in those fumes, which is a bad thing. And that's something that you just want to avoid. This is a big thing to note. Most CO2 lasers come in with their own enclosure and has its own exhaust port where it can exhaust it out. And if it's good enough, great. But if it's not, then it goes the same thing with this. Whereas most diode lasers, they don't come with an enclosure, or the ones that you do, they kind of suck, like the ones I got. So the fact of the matter is you kind of want to stay away from that stuff, especially if you don't have a well-ventilated area. So just note that. Now, as far as buying a laser, there's several different types of lasers, but the two most used ones in households is diode lasers, which is what I got, or a CO2 laser. So the difference between a diode and CO2 laser, diode price range for itself, diode lasers you're looking at between $100 to say $500, whereas with a CO2 laser you're looking at a cheap Chinese knockoff about $2,000, and for brand name you're talking about $5,000 to $10,000. So $5,000 versus $500, that's a significant difference. So why would you spend $5,000 versus $500? Well, diode lasers, you tend to get a very low wattage. Like mine is 1.6 watts. I've seen some up to 5 watts, but the fact of the matter is the CO2 lasers, most of them just start out at 40 watts. There's just no comparison. Now, the bigger the wattage means the faster it can move, and the more it can cut through and stuff like that. So something like the image that you've seen, that towards the start with the kids, what the fact of the matter is that took 3.5 hours. On a CO2 laser, you're looking at somewhere around maybe 20 minutes to 30 minutes, something like that. Maybe a little bit more depending on the machine. But the fact of the matter is you're talking about a fraction of the time. Some of the designs that I've done in the past, that's taken 8 or 9 hours. Some people ran the same type of design into a CO2 laser, and they came back and said they got done in 15 minutes. It's a massive difference. You just can't compare it. It's a massive difference in time. But the fact of the matter is you're also paying more. The other big thing is with CO2 lasers, you're going to have to use distilled water. You're going to have to jump through a lot more hoops like that. Whereas diode lasers, you don't really have to do any of that. It's kind of like a laser pointer, but a lot more powerful. However, it's, again, not as powerful as the CO2. So that's just something you got to know. Now, personally, what I'm going to say is it's a little bit controversial. A lot of people say, go with CO2 lasers. I'd say fine if you can afford it, but the average household in the United States has less than $500 in its bank account. It can't afford it. So the fact of the matter is go with a diode if you really want. Now, if you need to get it done like quickly and stuff like that, then you might want to hold off until you get a CO2. But the fact of the matter is also one big thing that you need to note is CO2. The parts have a limited lifespan as far as usage wise. I forgot off the top of my head, but I think most of them are like 20,000 hours of usage, whereas diodes don't really have that. There is some type of limit, but it's kind of like a TV or whatever, where yours might last for 20 years, mine might last for 5 years, and the next person might last for 50 years. It's kind of one of those things, whereas CO2 lasers, it's very exact. It's still off. One person might last a little bit longer than the others, but you're still talking about 20,000 hours. In some cases, a lot shorter than that. So I've seen some tubes that are only warranting down to 200 hours. So also note that. But still, with that one in mind, you're probably not going to hit that very easily. That's quite a bit of time into itself. So with that one in mind, that's a big thing that I would like to note right now. If you can get things done a lot faster with better equipment, but you're also paying for it. Now, as far as things goes, one big thing I want to mention with all laser CO2, fiber, or diode, or whatever, I don't care. You always wear laser safety glasses. Everybody in the room wears laser safety glasses, or at least have it in a laser safety enclosure with special sheeting on it. Reason why is you don't want laser eye surgery, so these things can make you blind. The fact of the matter is it takes 1/10 of a second to cause permanent eye damage, and we're not talking about you know, you get a headache once in a while or whatever. No, you can go blind. So that's a big thing to note. You know, always be safe around lasers. So with that one in mind, if you got any questions, anything else, then feel free to let me know in the comment section. And I'll try to answer as quickly as possible. But leave a like, subscribe, share, and check out my Patreon and whatnot. And I'll see you next video. Hope you have a great day.